Off and on over the last few months, I've been taking a sporadic look at some of the X-Files figures released by Sideshow Collectibles. This wasn't a huge line, there was only about 5 to 7 characters released total, and it's certainly a line that experienced dramatic highs and lows. But for a very long time, these Sideshow action figures were the only 1/6 scale X-Files figures on the market, and over the years they've become increasingly difficult to get a hold of. But today I'm going to turn my attention to c.g.b.spender, or the cigarette smoking man. Considering the line's relatively small lineup of characters, I think this is an ideal choice. He is of course the big overarching villain of the X-Files, I suppose, across the entire TV show, so it makes perfect sense that we'd have an action figure of him. So to begin with, the packaging is of course the standard packaging that we've seen across all of these figures in this line. I think it's really nice, very presentable, very attractive. I really love that green X in the corner there, and of course we have a little image from the TV show at the very bottom, and then in the right hand side we have a production still of the actor playing the character that we see in action figure form, which is brilliant. On the side panel we have an image of the figure itself, which looks really good, and again we can stack these figures together on a shelf and they all line up and look uniform and look really presentable. Whilst on the reverse we have another image of the figure itself with a little bit of bio about the character and an indication of other figures in this line. Obviously in this case we can see Mulder and Scully down there, but the overall presentation is really nice. The theme is consistent throughout and it feels very much in the spirit of the X-Files with those green and blue hues and mysterious overlaid writing and things like that. It looks really nice, very presentable, very displayable. And then finally, when we open the gatefold cover, we have on the left hand side some more images from the show, such as the UFO up there, of course the tagline, the truth is out there, and some more information and a bit of a bio about the character, which is great. And it's all written up in that typewriter font, which is really cool, very retro, and again, totally in spirit of the show. Meanwhile, on the right hand side, we have that display window so we can see the figure in all its glory and all its bits and pieces, and it looks really very nice. Once out of the packaging, he does look very well presented. The tailoring is very nice in this figure, and I'm pleased to say for a figure that could have been potentially quite boring, they've done a really nice job with the suit. It's made of material that's fairly reflective of light. It's a nice blue rather than being a sort of grey or a brown, so it looks a little bit more visually rich and interesting. And I'm really pleased to say that the head sculpt, which can be hit and miss on these figures, is actually really excellent. I think they've done a fantastic job. This has a very strong likeness of the actor William B. Davis, and I think they've really caught all the nuance and details in his face. If you look at all the lines around the eyes and around the mouth there, I think they've done a fantastic job of this. And, you know, it depends which episode you're thinking of him as being from, because of course he's been in the show a very long time. In its initial run, it lasted for 9 years. He was a regular appearance, so obviously he aged significantly between the beginning of the show and the end of the show, but I think this is sort of pitched at being sort of around the middle of its run, but it's clearly identifiable as c.g.b.spender at any point in the show. If I was going to be critical of it, I might say he looks a little bit probably too gaunt, a little bit too thin, but that's a very minor nitpick. Overall, I think this is a really solid likeness, and they've done an incredible job with this sculpt, and the paint apps are really nicely applied around the eyes in particular. I think they've done a really good job of this. Also, I praise Sideshow for their attention to detail, because on the side of his neck here, we can see that he actually has one of those nicotine patches, which is really very cool. Just a subtle little thing, but it makes all the difference. And yeah, I'd say I love this. I think it's really nice to see this kind of detail. As I mentioned previously, the tailoring is really very nice on the figure. As I said, that material that they've used feels quite rich and luxurious, which is really nice, and like I said, it catches the light very nicely. He has a blue shirt underneath, which is quite cool, and he has the tie. Now the tie might look a little bit too fat in places, but nevertheless I think it looks really good, very presentable, and it's nice to see that of course they've got these extra buttons on here to keep everything tight and in place, and so yeah, his costume never creases and it always looks really sharp, which is fantastic. This carries through to the trousers, of course, and in standard Sideshow style, of course, when you lift up the leg, he does actually have socks as well. The shoes are just the standard rubber that we've seen on, say, the Bond figures. Not a lot of detail in them, not overly impressive, no paint apps running through these, which is a shame, but they do the job. Now, these figures were released in the early 2000s, so anyone who's ever bought a Sideshow Collectibles figure from this time knows what to expect in terms of articulation, but I'll just run through it here quickly. He does have a ball-jointed neck, so he can look all the way around, and of course he can look up and down. Huge range of motion. I really like this joint perfect. He's got ball jointed shoulders, so his arms kick up and out to the side. He's got double jointed elbows, so his arms can reach right the way in if you want and get him to touch his head, which is great. There's also rotation at the lower arm as well, which the arm rotates right the way around, and of course there is a pin swivel at the wrist, so the wrist rotates right the way around, and of course it hinges as well, meaning he can bend his arm, well, his wrist right the way forwards and backwards as well, which is great. Now he's also got articulation in the upper abs, in the chest area, so he can kind of move from side to side and wobble forwards and backwards a little bit and kind of arc from side to side, which is great. And then they've also got articulation in the waist as well, which allows him to sort of rotate around. He's got those ball jointed hinges hips, so their legs of course kick out to the sides, they kick forwards, they kick backwards, and he's got double jointed knees as well, meaning of course the legs can kick right the way back there and look really, really solid. In the ankles, his feet can rotate right the way around. There is a swivel just there, and of course they arc up and down on a hinge as well, which is fantastic stuff. As you'd expect, he also comes with a handful of accessories, including of course his Morley packet of cigarettes and a cigarette, which is a pretty cool addition. I like this. And of course, it's an absolutely key accessory for this character. He is the cigarette smoking man. It's his defining quality. He's got to have a cigarette. But he also comes with this silenced assassin's rifle, which is pretty cool. Now, I won't give away what the significance of this item is. If you've not seen the show, it's a spoiler, but it's very cool that they've picked up on this item of all of them in the show's history. I think this is very cool, and yeah, very, very nicely done. It does come in 3 parts. It has the extended tripod legs, which fold in and out, which is quite nice. It has the main barrel of the gun holster, and then it has the scope on top. One thing to point out though is that this doesn't really slide together that great on mine. I feel like the silver barrel is kind of come loose at some point, so it kind of sits there and kind of wobbles. So it's not quite as tight as I would like. So I don't know whether that's just on mine or whether that's a problem overall with this figure, but something to be aware of. Overall, it's very nicely sculpted. I think they've done a very nice job of it. Some extra details would have been nice, and it's unusual for Sideshow not to go the extra mile and put an extra shading on the barrel, on the grip of the weapon in particular, but nevertheless, it is a nice accessory to have. And the tripod stands just tall enough for it to sit at a comfortable level for the figure to be able to grip it and hold it. Now, I appreciate this isn't really the setup where you're supposed to have the figure holding it. It's not like he's aiming the rifle per se, but nevertheless, you want to have him interacting with it, or at least I do. So I like to make sure that I've got his hands on the grip and on the barrel there to make it feel like he's actively using the weapon. So I think overall, I think it looks really good. It is nicely scaled to fit together, so I think this looks pretty decent. And really pleasingly, his hands have been sculpted a little bit different to your standard Sideshow hands, to be fair, but they are sculpted perfectly so that they can hold his smaller accessories with no problems whatsoever. Nice solid grip, no danger of the cigarette slipping through his finger, for example, or the packet slipping out of his grip there. It all fits very, very nicely, very tightly and snugly, and it looks really, really good. I think that cigarette in particular looks very cool, and yeah, I think overall this is a really fun figure, considering the character itself isn't probably the most dynamic or visually interesting character in the show. I think they've done a really stand-up job with the figure himself, so I think this is definitely a real winner in the line. If you enjoyed this video, please do give it a like, and remember to subscribe as there'll be plenty more videos soon.